Tynwald was a little shorter than recent sittings, but there was a lot packed in, despite Tynwald and government talking for years about funding solutions for the mobile and family library. That was back on the agenda. Members all agreed that something must be done, but nobody seemed willing to take responsibility for solving the problem. There was also discussion on immigration policy and a tense debate on the political spat between Lawrie Hooper and the Chief Minister. Here are some of the Tynwald highlights. First up, Lawrie Hooper on funding for the family library. Government and Tynwald have been looking into this for years. How on earth have we got to this point?
So I think it's just an unwillingness on the part of government, and you heard that this morning, the Education Department saying it's not our responsibility, it's not our job to help sort this out. And actually, it kind of is. Back in 2020, the Council of Ministers put a report together that said we should sort out the long-term funding of organisation of the family library, because everyone recognises they provide quite a valuable service, especially the mobile library, which is the area that my constituents are most concerned about. And so that's what we said back in 2020, 5 years ago, and the government just hasn't really moved on it. And it's because I think the Education Department, like you heard today, are saying, well, it's not our statutory responsibility, so we're not touching this one. And I think that's to lose sight of the broader social benefits that are provided, and that, actually, if you want these services, you are going to have to find some support for them. And I know the Treasury have been offering support in recent years, but that's declining. You see that from the accounts. This support is going to disappear at some point in the near future. And actually, is that a long-term sustainable model for a library? We all know libraries are not for-profit organisations. They're not designed to make money. They are a service for the public. And I think if government is intent on supporting a service, they should be clear about that. And if they are happy to leave it and say, no, we think that can close, I think they need to be quite honest about that position, because there will be people on the island that lose out if that service disappears. We heard today that Henry Blue Noble School doesn't have a school library. They rely on the family library service as well. So if the government is content to allow that provision to disappear, they need to look at what the impact is going to be on our communities and put something in place to at least pick up where that leaves off. I suspect that would be more expensive than simply continuing to support a service that we already have.
At some point during the various deliberations that have been going on over the past decade, DOI was tasked with setting up a working party. I mean, you're a member of the department. Whatever happened to that?
So I think that's where that report came out in 2020. It was a working party that produced a series of recommendations. There was a library committee as well in Tynwald that made a series of very similar recommendations. And I think one of the things that was talked about at the time was trying to find a way to make libraries more broadly across the island on a more sustainable footing. Some local authorities provide them, some don't. Some of those that don't do make a contribution, but others don't. It's a bit of a postcode lottery, in fairness. And I think one of the recommendations that came out of that work was we should find a way of standardising some of this stuff. And it could very well be that the next step is to say, well, actually, maybe it is a local authority service. Maybe all local authorities should have to contribute in some way to the support of a library for their residents. I don't know the answer myself, but it feels like if government chooses not to act, that's a choice they've made, that's a decision they've made. It isn't just something that happens without their knowledge.
And of course, one of the suggestions that has been bandied around is that rather than local authorities currently having the position where they may provide library services, an act of Tynwald could be changed to say that they shall, and in which case this funding problem disappears. Admittedly, some ratepayers end up paying a little bit more on their rates. It seems as though that would be an easy fix for any central government to do. Obviously, local authorities may not be best pleased with that, but why do you think that's never happened?
It's one of the options. I mean, another option that was considered was centralising all the libraries on the island under a separate management board. And again, it almost feels like you're moving deck chairs for no reason. The local authorities that do run libraries, by and large, I think they do a pretty good job, actually. In the local libraries, we have a good facilities. Why would you want to change that? And so the idea that says maybe everyone should contribute fairly towards a library service, that kind of resonates. And I've got a motion later on talking about an all-island leisure rate so that we all contribute fairly towards our swimming pools. schools, for example. And maybe that is the direction of travel, to start standardising what we expect local authorities to provide, and then allowing them to decide how they go about providing it. And some of them may very well decide, yes, we're going to band together and we will collectively fund, something like the mobile library, for example. They may all decide to run their own small libraries. Who knows where they'll end up. But I think there's definitely something to be said for having a conversation with local authorities about asking them to step up to the plate and empowering them to step up to the plate to make sure that their residents and their ratepayers are getting the services that they need.
And I suppose if any local authority is listening, they have the power to do that without being told to do it by central government.
Absolutely. And I think Douglas Council, the newly elected council leader, was posting on social media that he was going to try and find a way to work with others on this. So it's definitely the case that local authorities can already, if they chose to, just step up to the plate and solve this problem and protect a service that many of their residents will rely on. And I think that's the difficulty here is, central government as a government can't really tell local authorities what to do. Tynwald as a parliament can, but it is much better if those local authorities come together by themselves and decide to take action.
This whole issue, though, is symptomatic of one of the fundamental failings of the way in which we do government on the Isle of Man. I don't think any Tynwald member would disagree about the value of the family library, but as no specific agency of government is responsible for sorting this problem out, nothing gets done.
I think that's slightly wrong, because the Department of Education has the legal viaries to provide a library. So they are the ones that are responsible, in my mind, because the power to step in actually rests with them. They also do rely on the service, like we heard today. 10 schools apparently utilise the mobile library, and there's one school that utilises the family library itself. So the Education Department benefits greatly from the existence of this organisation. So if there is any one part of government that should take ownership, it's the department that has the legal power to step in and take ownership. They've chosen not to, and that came across very clearly today, is that the department, their position is we don't think we should be the ones getting involved, and it's just financial. They were quite open. We don't have the money. There are ways of resolving that, I think, which need to be explored, and it doesn't feel to me like the department is in that space of being willing to explore options. It feels like they've just said, hands up, nothing to do with us, and actually I think it is. And I think this is a bigger problem we have across government, is where government departments aren't specifically instructed to do something. Sometimes they just won't do it. And I think that's something that I'm concerned about more broadly than just libraries. You have lots of permissive permissions in law, and quite often we're seeing government departments say, well, it's not mandatory, it's not statutory, so I don't have to do it, therefore I'm not going to do it. And the risk there is a lot of our services are provided in that way, and if that's the mentality, we could be at risk of losing some quite valuable services simply because the government is saying we don't have to do this.
And of course the problem is that government doesn't have as much money as it used to have, so it can't fund everything. There was a fairly robust set of questions that the Treasury Minister was fending off this morning in relation to the growth of the Manx economy. Is it possible that government can grow its income sufficiently to actually meet all the requirements that backbenchers such as yourself are keen for them to deliver?
Yes, it absolutely is, and this is something the economic strategy talked about extensively. It talked about growing bits of the economy, about attracting workforce. It talked about rebalancing the tax system. Those are all things which we know we need to do, and they're all things which the government, I think, is struggling with. They are resolutely afraid of tackling the problems in our tax system, and you've seen that in their solutions. Their solutions to funding shortfalls are to cut frontline services, or to say, well, we're going to start taxing working people more. The tax rate went up. We're looking now at a potential new levy being introduced by the Treasury. Their solution to their funding problems is to tax working people more, because they can't go anywhere. We're stuck here. We live on the island. There are plenty of other things they could and should be exploring, which the economic strategy quite clearly explained, which the Treasury have just put in the too difficult box. And I think that's the problem we have. You've got a government that at its core isn't following its own strategy, is too afraid to make some of those difficult decisions, and it's much easier just to cut services and deal with the fallout than it is to actually tackle some of the bigger economic problems that they're facing.
I suppose, though, to be fair on the Treasury Minister, he had planned to tackle one of the issues, which was removing the triple lock from the pension scheme, which would have made the pensions or the National Insurance Fund much more sustainable and ensure that people in their 20s and 30s will have a pension when eventually they retire. That was effectively knocked into the long grass by Tynwald.
So the NI fund has nothing really to do with the day-to-day running of government expenses, so I think conflating the two issues is unhelpful.
I suppose the reason I mention that is, I mean, you said that they're not prepared to grasp the big issues. I mean, that's a big issue. It was, the attempt was made to grasp it.
So again, the way they did that was to announce it as we've done this, it's happening. There was no engagement, there was no consultation, and I think if they'd have handled that properly, they probably would have got public support, they probably would have got Tynwald support for it. But again, it's a symptom of that kind of arrogance that the government seems to have, which is they're going to do things which they think they want to do. And again, that's, whilst it might be politically a challenging decision, it's an easy one to make. Actually, we'll just do that, especially when you think the UK might do it anyway. It's quite an easy thing for them to deal with. But again, that doesn't solve your funding problem for the rest of government. It makes the NI fund more sustainable, pushes it out another 20, 30 years, makes it much more sustainable in the future. It doesn't help us today. And I think that's the problem government's got, is they are quite willing to make decisions that they're not going to have to live with the consequences of. But actually decisions that will have more immediate consequences are the ones they struggle with.
Are there any green shoots that you can see?
It's difficult. I'm quite disillusioned at present with government, with Tynwald as a whole. I don't think the system we have is working. I don't think our political system is working. It's not producing the right outcomes for people. It certainly isn't producing outcomes that people can understand, and I don't think it's making people's lives better. And ultimately, that's why we're here, is to make people's lives better. And if things the government are doing are not making people's lives better, then they shouldn't be doing them.
Cabinet Office Minister David Ashford MHK made a quite lengthy statement saying government hadn't met its target of bringing a report on inward migration to May Tynwald. Effectively, Cabinet Office has missed the target.
Well, it's across government. It's not just Cabinet Office. Obviously, being immigration, it involves all areas of government. We were hopeful that we'd have the full report here to the May sitting. That would turn out to be overly ambitious, but we will be coming back with the full report and a full debate to Tynwald in July.
And I guess, in a way, it's opportune that this report isn't ready because, of course, there have been quite a lot of announcements coming out of Downing Street about migration, and of course that is a matter that will heavily influence whatever we do, I suppose.
So in relation to the UK White Paper, and I think it's a good opportunity you ask me this, Phil, just to try and settle some of the unease out there. I know there has been a lot of unease about the UK White Paper, and it's important we remember what a White Paper actually is. It's a way of governments putting ideas out there for discussion and for debate. It doesn't actually indicate those are changes that are actually physically going to happen. They're things under consideration. So there is no changes currently proposed. These are things that the UK government are considering they might actually do. So it is very important at the moment to stress that's where it is in the UK. Obviously, we try where we can to align tightly with the UK. We do have the ability to vary where we believe it's in the national interest to do so. But we will wait and engage, obviously, with the Home Office in the UK around the any changes that they might decide to bring forward. But as I say, at the moment, the whole situation's fluid.
And in terms of what you know, which is the paper that's about to arrive in Tynwald members' inboxes, can you give us any? Well, I presume you through your statement you've given some hints, but what are the things that are being looked at, and what are the changes that we may or may not see?
So it's basically review across our entire immigration system. As I said in my statement, as an island, we have been very welcoming to new arrivals in the island for centuries. The island has been built basically in many ways on immigration coming from the UK, Ireland and further afield. I
think the only people you missed out were the Vikings.
Quite possibly in my list. But I don't know if that was more immigration than an invasion was. But anyway, but yeah, Yeah, so we've built ourselves an immigration, and one of the key planks of the message is for those that wish to come to the island to work and contribute to our society, they will always be welcomed with open arms. But one of the things we've got to do is ensure that our visa routes are fit for purpose, and ensure that if you have people trying to abuse that system, that they are actually caught, and that visa routes are not open to that type of abuse. We have seen criminal gangs who've been across the world who've been actually very good at exploiting loopholes, and it's important we keep our immigration constantly under review to ensure that we don't fall foul of those situations.
And of course that's something that has embarrassed the Isle of Man government in the not too distant past in relation, well, you have this really difficult balance to strike, haven't you? On the one hand, you don't want to introduce a level of concern amongst the populace that we're going to effectively allow a whole raft of different people to come into the island, and yet on the other hand you are actively trying to encourage people to come to the island with business ideas and opportunities to grow the Manx economy. I mean, we've already seen some level of conflict between different parts of the UK Labour Party in relation to the deal that they've struck with Europe, in that some people are suggesting that inward migration, and particularly in relation to a youth migration scheme, is a good thing, and then others are saying, oh no, we really don't want that to happen. So how do you get the right balance on this?
It is a very difficult balance, and it's a very sensitive topic as well, immigration. So it is important that, our language is very, very careful when we talk about it. The key message is controlled immigration. It's about ensuring as a nation that we have the people that we need coming in, because we do have vacancies across a large number of sectors. Our entire economic model, if you go back over, like I say, not just a few decades, but also centuries, has actually been built with the help of people coming in, becoming part of our community, and actually, becoming effectively integrated within our community and building up our economy, which benefits absolutely everyone on the island, those who already live here and those coming in. And it's important that we keep that economic model. But like I say, it's equally important that the phrase is controlled immigration, that we are getting the right people in to fill the right vacancies. And one of the other key things from my message is this government is absolutely committed to putting Manx workers first, to ensuring that people coming in filling roles, it is only roles where we cannot actually find a Manx individual to fill that role first.
Christian Jones caught up with Chief Minister Alf Cannon, who'd been away in London just before Tynwald.
So I was invited to Downing Street along with my colleagues from the Crown Dependencies to recognise the UK-EU reset, to be part of the announcement that took place to meet senior cabinet ministers and continue to promote the island and ensure that we are in the UK government's thinking when it comes to matters such as these resets or relationships that they are undertaking with international countries. So I think it's been a culmination really of 3 years quite hard work. We've got some serious discussions underway with the UK government, particularly around offshore wind and the need for us to be part of the CFD rounds and have proper access to the UK grid, because otherwise we're not going to have a marketplace for any renewable opportunities that are developed offshore on the island. We've also had some quite serious discussions around beneficial ownership recently. I was down in London, met Dan Jarvis, the Security Minister. We met with Nick Thomas-Symonds in terms of what the EU were what the UK were discussing in the EU, and of course we have a very important relationship in terms of our customs and excise relationship with the United Kingdom. So there's a number of important matters, and of course we build on a figure that was released by the Department for Business around a calculation that they did, that the Crown Dependencies were contributing about 14% of all foreign direct investment into the UK. And I think that recognition in terms of the role that we can play in supporting the British economy has become more recognised in the UK government. And of course, we need to continue to build on that and ensure that we are in the UK's thoughts, and part of indeed negotiations that are taking place with at the moment the Gulf Cooperation Council, but also other negotiations of free trade agreements that they are undertaking.
And obviously you do have the British-Irish Council summits periodically. How important is it to keep up that dialogue throughout the year?
Yeah, it's very important. I think not only are there matters at which we're aware about, but from time to time matters crop up of which are unforeseen, and or challenges sometimes are mounted in terms of the Isle of Man's standing, and whether those challenges come from externally from politicians or come sort of internally from the UK. We need to be ready to respond, and of course we need to have I think that understanding with counterparts in Westminster in terms of the contribution that the Isle of Man makes to the British economy, and also how our self-governance system is operating. And of course they need to have, I think, both that personal knowledge of me and other ministers, but also that understanding of the constitutional position that the island has within the United Kingdom and British Isles frameworks.
The Tynwald Standards and Members' Interest Committee reported on the very public falling out between the Chief Minister and Lawrie Hooper. Oncan MHK Rob Collister was quite outspoken in the debate. It is fair to say that you had some fairly strong words to say in the debate in relation to the spat between Lawrie Hooper and the Chief Minister, and ultimately the Tynwald Management Committee's report, which recommended that the Chief Minister should withdraw the unparliamentary words that he used. They kind of have a point, don't they? Because we must make sure that debate doesn't descend into name calling.
Yeah, there's a code of conduct that we must all abide by when we're speaking in the chamber or as we undertake our role in the public domain. At the end of the day, it comes down to two things for me, and that is the fact when you read the report from the Tynwald Standards Committee, the fact was on the 15th of October, Mr. Hooper stood up in the chamber and resigned, which I felt was disrespectful both to the court and to the Chief Minister personally. And then on the 16th of October, you had the Chief Minister respond. Now, some would say that his response was far too aggressive. I personally feel, if you look at that report in detail, it clearly says when this word gaslighting has been used publicly and in a parliamentary setting, in the UK especially, it has always been picked up by the presiding officer at that time. And I would have expected the same to happen in Tynwald on the 16th of October when the Chief Minister made those remarks, for the presiding officers to stand up and said that word should be removed. It should not have gone to a committee. It should not have created recommendations to come back 7 months later. And there is a lesson to learn here. Plus, as I said in my speech, sometimes in the arena of politics, you have to accept a few bruises along the way. And I think there's far too many of my political colleagues who are far too sensitive when we're in a debate, especially when some of these people are some of the most aggressive in the chamber, both in the media and in the chamber. I think we have to respect each other, have a good battle on the policies and the direction we need to take for the island, but also accept that you're going to win some battles, you're going to lose some battles, and you will come out with a few scars. And I know that from my own personal experience, having now been in the chamber for 7 years.
It was, though, a bit harsh, the Chief Minister making suggestions about Mr. Hooper, who had gone away on a parliamentary visit the following day, the day after he'd delivered his pretty devastating resignation speech. Chief Minister then basically said, Mr. Hooper can't be bothered to be here. He prefers to be away on a parliamentary visit. That's a bit low, isn't it?
I agree. I think there are comments that was made both on the 15th of October and on the 16th of October by both individuals that got right under the skin of each other. I think we have to learn to respect each other in the chamber, accept that tough decisions have to be made, but we also have to be mindful of the media listening, and we also have to be mindful of the public listening. And what really disappoints me is there's far too much time in this administration being focused on people having to stand up or having to debate where allegations have been made, submitted to committees, then reports have come back. This does not put Tynwald in a good light, and we have to learn between ourselves to be respectful to each other, but as you say, accept that there will be political clashes along the way. And I think the Chief Minister needs to learn that lesson as well. He is the leader of the Manx government. He is the one that everyone looks up to for that leadership. He obviously clearly did not reach that benchmark in October, but did it warrant an investigation? Did it warrant a report? Did it warrant recommendations to be made? No, I don't believe so on this occasion.
Is the Tynwald Standards and Members' Interest Committee part of a faction? Because this was suggested by your colleague in Onken. Well, maybe not so much the committee, but the presiding officers perhaps were not as impartial as perhaps they should be. That was the suggestion. Is that fair?
I don't think so. I think, as I've said in all of my speeches, and somebody who's been under investigation a number of times myself, I find the Tynwald Standards and Members' Interest Committee has an incredibly difficult job. I think what is happening, or what I'm finding in this administration, far too many correspondence being received is going straight to investigation. There's no arbitration or mediation to sort of try and resolve some of this stuff in the corridors of Tynwald, outside of the public gaze, should we say. I think there's too many small incidents becoming full investigations. We should not be wasting the committee's time on that. We have to find a way to work with each other. It has been an incredibly difficult administration. I've now been elected twice, and I'm really grateful to represent the constituency of Onken. But I find this administration far more challenging than I did the first administration. And you have to question what is different in this administration. Is it coming down to personalities? Is it coming down to some of the individuals that we have within our parliament? Or does it come down to cliques within the parliament, which is causing some problems? I've always been very open, transparent and honest with all of my colleagues, with the public and with media. And I feel that we have to sort this out. It's probably too late for this administration, but whatever happens in 2026, whoever gets re-elected and whoever comes into the Manx Parliament in 2026, we have to learn lessons of respecting each other, both in the chamber and outside every bit of work we do. But expect to have challenges when we believe that the direction by the government is wrong, or if we believe that one of our colleagues is saying something that's not correct. We have a right to challenge that individual to say that statement is not correct and this is the reason why. Like I did yesterday on the 20 mile an hour, I clearly articulated the reasons why the minister was wrong about her engagement. I gave the reasons, I gave the evidence, and then it was up to Tynwald to decide.
There was a light-hearted moment when Gary Clewett, MLC, mistakenly called Julie Edge Miss Onken, rather than the Honourable Member for Onken.
I am actually the first female representative for Onken anyway, so I was the first to ever be elected as an MHK as a woman. So yeah, Miss Onken. Not a Miss World, but I'm a Miss Onken.
Highly predictable that all you Eastern members were going to lay it on thick as to all the tremendously important reasons why your constituents shouldn't have to pay something that the rest of the island pays.
Well, I think it's been debated quite a lot really about the other areas and the regional swimming pools in the north, south and west. The NSC is the National Sports Stadium. When it was set up would have been the right time to do it, wouldn't it? And of course, because of the land being donated by Douglas, I think that's why it didn't happen at that point in time. Not really sure why Onken and anywhere else didn't have to pay anything at that point, but my point is, across the island we've got some amazing facilities. We all utilise them. As I said in the debate, I did have some postcode data for the NSC. And to be honest, it's about 50-50 for the usage of people in the east and people from a lot from the south, to be honest, because it's a good place to go either before work or on your way home. So it is utilised by everybody on the island, which I know all of the other pools are open up for that as well, but because they are in very specific places, it probably is more local use or for people that have a specific need in whichever type of pool. The thing that was interesting, there was no mention of Ballacaveen pool or Glencrutchery pool, which was they were bringing in the previous debates with regards to the rate and the southern pool issue. So I just think it's proved a point. I think we really do need to look at this across the island, but to have it as if it would have been an all-island pool rate, I think that could have been utilised in a different way during debate. But to put an all-island leisure rate when there's leisure facilities in all of the east and there's no contribution from anybody else, I just think that's what really made me vote against it more so, to be honest. I just think a proper review needs to be done to see the impacts on everybody, and should we just have one rate that's simple for everybody? As I said, I get 2 sets of rates. I get one from government, one from Onken, and perhaps one set of rates for everything that you should be paying for on your rates. It would be the way forward, in my opinion, and it would be good for the Efficiency Minister to look at this.
One of the drawbacks, which certainly David Ashford raised, of an all-island rate, of course, is the democratic deficit. So effectively, local authorities would be setting their budgets and expecting a central pot of money to be distributed to them. So basically, they wouldn't be responsible for what they spend because the ratepayers vote in the commissioners, but someone else decides where the money comes from, and that someone else would be central government. Can you see that that could be a problem?
I can, and it was good the way that he said that. However, I think if we ensured there's good governance structures around the devolving of that funding, we do devolve funding from government out to schools, and they operate a little bit in that thing, so they have complete autonomy at that point. I think it was interesting because part of the debate this week, the DOI minister was talking about the way that they're going to expect an agreement with the local authorities on highways and that. Well, I was thinking, is there any money coming with this as well, or is this just going to be an expectation? So I just think it's a good opportunity now to get it right across the island. And as I've just said, DOI talking about handing further responsibilities out to the local authorities, which is great, but nothing comes for free. There's expected different levels of service. It's either got to be devolved out from government or the local authorities will be putting the rates up. So I think it's the right time to really discuss rates across the island and what do we want local authorities to be delivering in their areas. And I think that we all do different things. It's in Onken, they still do their street light and they still do their refuse. They still do their rates bills. We have a fantastic park that's accessible to everybody across the island. And, they do an awful lot, actually, Onken, for quite low rates, and they have been kept quite low, really. My other concern today, if we'd have put that through, was there's been no impact analysis on the effects that it could have on the most vulnerable in those areas, and I think these all need to be considered.
We'll move on. The other item that I felt made quite an extraordinary suggestion on was the Tynwald Standards and Members' Interests debate, where you called into question the impartiality of the presiding officers. That's quite an extraordinary thing to do.
Well, I wasn't allowed to finish what I was about to say. So what I wanted to say was, because what was in front of us, I felt shouldn't be in front of us yesterday. Basically saying the Chief Minister's done wrong and hold your hands up and you've got to do this. And this was done by a committee of a group of people that we all respect as honourable members. However, it shouldn't have got to that stage, is the point I was trying to make, but I was interrupted and not allowed to say, was that the presiding officers should have stopped it before it got to that point, if it was unparliamentary. And that was my concern with that, because I felt it was uncomfortable for everybody, and you can feel the tension in the room. However, equal standards have got to be for everything. And, as I explained during the debate, I don't always feel that is happening. And certainly I've got many examples of where I can, over the 8 years, it's been quite horrendous, to be honest, the treatment, and some of the emails I've had, I suppose I'd have to say, I wouldn't call it's just bullying, constant bullying, intimidation, trying to knock you down.
Is that, though, not kind of part of the role of being in politics, that inevitably people are going to do what they can to undermine your position if they disagree with what you're trying to do?
Totally agree with that. That's what we're in here for, isn't it? And but sometimes the undermining it, I feel is being a bit malicious, really, to be honest. And as I described, I've seen some evidence following situations, and I just find that really underhand, because we're supposed to be in here all working for the people of the Isle of Man, and we disagree on lots, and that's what we should be doing. However, to then be doing things that I feel are totally unprofessional and inappropriate is not the right way forward. However, I was also trying to describe it that I stood up to that, and I will continue to stand up to it, because if I've got an opinion that I want to represent for my constituents, I will do that. Whether they like to hear it or not is their problem, actually. It's not mine, it's other honourable members' problem. And I will say it, and I will always be professional in Parliament and use the right language as best we can, because sometimes you can think I've said something, you might have said it slightly wrong, but no, I'm just trying to make sure that the professional behaviour is upheld. And, I will question it. I did question it yesterday with regards to the DEFA minister, and I understand why she had a bit of an outburst. But you've got to think of who's listening out there. The farming community will not be thinking that's a funny situation. So, she made a little bit of an apology. And I think that's where you should be upholding that. And we should all be doing that in the chamber if there's something not quite right, and all observing and making sure we've got a good, professional, productive chamber that's there for the people of the Isle of Man.
Speaker Ewan Watterson was unusually downbeat after his committee's recommendation that the Chief Minister withdraw some unparliamentary language was defeated.
You obviously chair the Tynwald Standards and Members' Interests Committee, and it generally has relatively dry issues to deal with. Or when I say that, because you've just pulled a face, what I mean is, in previous iterations of Tynwald, it has generally had a relatively straightforward ride, but in this particular Tynwald, you seem to be very busy.
Indeed, the work that the Tynwald Standards Members' Interest Committee dealing with complaints about members is some of the hardest work that you can imagine, really, because it's not a pleasant, not a natural thing to sit in judgment on your peers and to try and divine what should happen in the grand context of looking at standards parliamentary practice in the context of our own history here and, of course, in the wider Commonwealth. And that's always a really challenging thing for us to do, and we take it incredibly seriously. And hence the reports that we've produced on the back of that.
And in this particular instance, as an impartial observer, which I try to be, it does look a little bit like, on the one hand, Lawrie Hooper pulled a bit of a fast one on the Council of Ministers, and particularly the Chief Minister, and said things that certainly the Chief Minister believes are just not true. The Chief Minister then had a little bit of time to ponder that before saying, basically, calling out Lawrie Hooper. And if it was just that, presumably this wouldn't have been a matter that the Tynwald Standards and Members' Interests Committee would have had much of an involvement with. But the issue for you was the unparliamentary language.
That's right. I mean, Mr. Hooper is entitled to resign and say the things he wanted to say. The Chief Minister is entitled to respond to those things. The issue at hand, the only issue at hand really, was the language that was used. And in the Isle of Man, I think we hold ourselves to a high standard when it comes to our dealings with each other, especially in the chamber. And so the use of the words falsehood, for example, gaslighting, we've just passed legislation about gaslighting. It's a serious thing. And my concern really is that what Tynwald has done is it has lowered the standard of debate and accepted a lower standard of behaviour when dealing with our colleagues. And that's something that gives me great concern. It's something that, Tynwald's had its highs and lows in the years that we worked together and over the 18 years that I've been a member. But this does give me cause for concern as to where we're going as an institution.
Of course, as far as the public were concerned, it was great sport. They actually heard two MHKs speaking with great passion about politics, and sometimes Tynwald members could be accused of not having enough passion in terms of the way they approach their politics. It's hard, I think, sometimes for the public to understand when a committee such as yours then steps in and says, actually, no, you need to tone down the rhetoric.
Well, of course, the first port of call was the presiding officer, and normally that's the speaker, but otherwise the president, who can step in in the moment and say, "Hang on now, I think that's gone too far," and indeed had recourse to do so during the debate. So that's the first step. But unfortunately, this was exacerbated by the fact that Mr. Hooper wasn't present when the comments were made, and therefore the complaint was only able to be made later, although people did reflect in the debate about the comments that the Chief Minister had made at the time, but the President hadn't ruled on it, and therefore it fell to the committee when a complaint was lodged to consider it.
And ultimately, you lost the vote.
As I say, this was not about having passion, which is welcome in Tynwald. We have plenty of issues in there that we get fired up about, but it's about doing it in a reasonable, fair and balanced way. This is a national parliament. This isn't a schoolyard. And, even in a schoolyard, we expect good behaviour and we expect reasonable language. And the same applies to Parliament, if anything, a slightly higher standard. So no one's trying to put the brakes on passion and enthusiasm in Tynwald, but I do think we all need to conduct ourselves in a way that reflects the role as a national parliament.
And I suppose that passion, it was very evident in one of the debates we heard in Tynwald this week, and that was in relation to the all-island leisure rate, and specifically Mr. Hooper, who proposed this, was referencing swimming pools. I once used in Tynwald a phrase, "This is an elaborately constructed smokescreen." There were several of those in the debate.
There were, and I think that's a Tynwald Bulls banker, that one. Don't worry, Phil. That's yeah, there were, and there's a lot of red herrings, misinformation. The one thing we all rally around is the fact that the rate system isn't fair. But of course, by making it more fair for some, you make it less fair for others, because fairness is not an objective quantity, is it? So, when this was very predictable, as Mr. Hooper said, council ministers have put it in the too difficult box. The members for Douglas, Onken and the East have put it in the "why would my voters ever support this" box. So, but once you've got that, the whole thing just isn't going to happen. So, but there is merit in trying to deal with this piece by piece, because by removing some of the inequalities as you go along, you remove some of the bigger obstacles for reform when you actually come to face the bigger reform challenge down the line. So I hope it is coming. It is something that has been going around the houses for decades now, but there doesn't seem to be a settled will to actually move forward on an alternative system.
it felt a little bit like the questions that were being asked of Mr. Crane as the stand-in Minister for DESC, the Education Department, in relation to the closure, imminent closure of the family library, where all members agreed. So in the family library case, all members seem to have agreed that the family library was worthy and should be kept open. In the this debate, everyone seemed to agree that the rate system was unfair and something should be done. But ultimately, nobody's doing anything.
Well, certainly in terms of the rate system, no, it appears that nobody else is trying to go. I say government does seem to have just put this in the too difficult box, so I was happy to support Mr. Hooper in trying to provide a little bit of fairness in just one area and one aspect of the wider system. Again, in terms of the mobile library, absolute travesty that this is being closed. It's disappointing that the first thing that members of Tynwald are finding out about it is so late in the day when you've got to wonder what can be done, but certainly I think all eyes were on Department of Education. It is the only department in government that seems to have the exact advice to provide a library service. I don't think that the nothing to see here, move along was a particularly compelling argument by the Department of Education, Sport and Culture. But what we do all know is that education's budgets, like everyone else, have been really squeezed. And I think, I'd like to think there was a willingness to try and find ways of making the money work for the family library. There's already an awful lot of government money that does go into supporting the mobile family library. But it did seem like it was sort of falling on deaf ears as far as the Department of Education, Sport and Culture was concerned. I would have hoped that they'd have been more willing to take on a role in order to try and find solutions rather than sort of stonewall that process, really.
For the final word on this, here's what Paul Crane MLC had to say in the debate on the Cannon-Hooper fallout.
I'm genuinely saddened to be discussing this today. I absolutely believe in the importance of appropriate language of behaviour in Tynwald. I think that goes without saying. I will be supporting recommendation 2 for training the members of the principles of that parliamentary language and debate. That would be welcome. It's very important, and I thank the committee for that. Recommendation 1 I see as different. I'm not wanting to tread on anybody's toes, and I'm not being judgmental in any way. I can only offer some honest views about comments made in this Honourable Court last October. I was present on the first of those days, but not on the second, because I was in the group going down to Jersey with the former Minister for Health and Social Care, so I was present for the first day and not the second. I've read the Hansard and the report of the Standards and Members' Interests Committee, together with its appendices, and I've studied the recommendations. There were clearly things said on the 16th and 17th of October last year which might have been better toned down, might have been better left unsaid. My reading of the Honourable Member's letter to the Members and Standards Committee is that his focus was primarily on a personal attack, an entirely unwarranted assault on his character, a character attack. Recommendation 1 reduces this to a call for Tynwald to vote on whether the Chief Minister should be asked to withdraw his use of remarks, but 3 specific terms: falsehood, fabrication, gaslighting, as used in this Honourable Court 7 months ago. I'm not comfortable with that. The report claims that, in our view, falsehood is another word for lie. I don't recognise that. I find the definitions of these things vary much more than that, especially falsehood, for example. If a member of this Honourable Court made statements about that climate change was not real, for example, I would find that as a falsehood. But if the member has said that and believes it, it's not a lie. It's something quite different. We're playing with words to some extent. Similarly, when we construct a narrative that we believe, if that narrative proves to be misguided, it becomes pure fabrication. But if we believe it, it's not actually a lie, if that's our understanding of what's happening. If I say that someone has given a falsehood or a fabrication of reality, I do not believe that I've accused them of necessarily telling a lie. I'm not surprised that these terms have sometimes been allowed to pass in other parliaments. As for gaslighting, I understand what the Honourable Member from Oncombe was saying, that there are sometimes different meaning. Indeed, I find that the meaning of that word is becoming sometimes more extreme as its usage grows. It's actually a difficult word. On the issue not covered in the recommendation, the specific accusation of character attack, I note the claim on the 16th of October, that the Chief Minister's, and I quote, ultimate aim is to try and privatise our health service. And I ask, is that a truth? Is it? Is there clear evidence of that? I don't believe so. It's a falsehood, but it's not a lie if the member believed it. It could be regarded as a character attack. I think here we're really playing with words. I recognise that on both sides offence has been taken, and I hope we can just move beyond this item quickly today. Tynwald is at its worst when we're looking inwardly at ourselves.
That was Paul Crane MLC. So what do you think? Is this a storm in a teacup, as many Tynwald members seemed to be thinking? Or is it important that parliamentary standards are maintained so that debates don't descend into gutter politics? Perhaps it's a bit of both. Let me know your thoughts on the programme by contacting Phil Gorn at manxradio.com and get in touch if you have any ideas for future shows. Don't forget, this programme is available as a podcast on Manx Radio's website. I'm Phil Gorn. Go to Thanks for listening.